Listening to myself, Alexis Conrad and Gloria De Piero, and we are joined on the line by Liz Snape, Assistant General Secretary at Unison. Liz, good morning and thank you for giving us your time this Sunday morning.
Good morning.
Now, at Unison, you have seen an almost 20% increase in people joining your already 1.3 million membership. The biggest surge in inquiries, it says here in an article in the Financial Times, came after Boris Johnson addressed the nation on the 10th of May, urging people to go back to work. So the Prime Minister urges people to go back to work. And Unison, a union that represents people mainly in the public sector, sees a surge in inquiries and people wishing to join. Why do you think that is?
I think in any uncertain situation, in any crisis, there are huge levels of fear and insecurity, fears about their jobs, their health, their families, their future. And it's no surprise, really, that individuals want to seek protection, support, advice and guidance. And unions are often the organisations they turn to. Our organisation, as you said, has seen our biggest spikes just after the 5 o'clock government briefings every day, which again sort of indicates that a lot of this is driven through fear and insecurity at such a dreadful time for everybody.
Liz, can you give us a profile of the kind of new people who are joining? I don't know if you have data on gender, age, job. Are there trends?
There are trends, and we do keep data on everything. We monitor everything almost on an hourly basis, who's joining, when they're joining, who is joining. And certainly we've seen a big influx in the last 3 months from, I would say, a non-traditional workforce. Care workers on very precarious hours, precarious contracts, casual workers. We've seen a lot of school staff joining us, perhaps not unsurprisingly, in the last 2 weeks. So it's a very different profile. And I guess the task for us is to make sure the very fact they've made the decision to join, we have to now work really hard to keep them, to look after them, to be relevant to them. You know, this is a very different group of workers to the miners and the dockers of the past, where you joined because everybody joined. These people have made a very distinct decision to join us, and we have to make sure we're relevant and useful to them.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to make sure that this isn't just a blip, but that you retain these members?
Yeah, I mean, my own in Unison, we work very hard at our recruitment. I do say to people, it doesn't just happen. We no longer assume that people will come looking for us. As I said, the days of people joining us because their dads or their granddads did are over. We have to go out and make a very different personal case to why people should join, to a very different looking workforce. You know, I mentioned care workers, teaching assistant, casual workers. We need to offer them what they tell us they need, not what we, perhaps arrogantly in the past, have told them what they need. We have to offer good value for money. We have to earn their £10 a month. They work really hard for that £10, and we need to make sure that we give them that money back tenfold. And again, a very intuitive approach that we have to be in touch with their lives. Yeah, their lives are often not just about work. They're about family issues, caring issues, health issues, and we have to give a far more holistic service to these new group of members, but growing group of members. We just have to work hard and we have to be relevant and speak on their issues, not our own.
You talked about the days of yesteryear when, no matter what the rise is in today's trade union membership, I mean, it's still dwarfed by the numbers that were members of trade unions in the 70s. Are the days of mass multi-million membership, are those days gone for good?
Not necessarily. We have an adage in the trade union movement, you never give up. And actually, sometimes the toughest days are our better days, because you have to look really hard and begin to focus on what the issue are. I mean, perhaps the issue of recruitment didn't have to be looked at as forensically in those days. perhaps there was an air of assumptions of union knows best. I think for those unions, particularly like Unison, that is working really hard at moving the union on to look at this new workforce, to look at new demands, new requirements, there is nothing to say that decline is inevitable. In fact, in my own union, we've had sustainable growth now for 3 consecutive years. So if we can do it, there is nothing to say that other unions can't do it, and we cannot get that overriding growth again within the union movement. You have to be relevant and you have to work hard for it.
Liz, for people listening to this who have not joined a union, or thinking about joining a union, or are thinking, well, what good is a union going to do for me? Specifically, they might be looking at, for example, teachers who you quite widely represent as well. But in the issue of schools opening up tomorrow, teachers have been uncomfortable with going back to work. Give us an example of how Unison is able to help them. I mean, what can you actually do?
Yeah, we don't represent the teachers. We represent the support staff in schools.
Yes,
teaching
apologies.
The cleaners, the caretakers and the dinner ladies. Absolutely essential as part of the school team. And we have been working as part of this initiative to seek understandings on safety, very clear and simple measures that we want to have put in place. We will work with individuals and groups of staff to make sure that they can explain their fears and anxieties to us, and where possible we can work with the school or the local authority or the government to try to get those things put in place. But we're there for people. We're there by their side when they need us, and we're there for them to express their anxieties, some of which we can deal with, and those we can't, we will work with them to overcome them. We call ourselves sort of a friend at work, and we're just by their side when they need us to articulate their worries and to try and solve them where we can.
And if I can just ask you about the care sector,
yes.
And you represent a lot of care workers.
Yes.
The government promised that by June, early June, they'd be able to test all residents and employees. So looking particularly at employees, how much are they falling short from your experience?
I mean, perhaps one of the biggest tragedies of this pandemic has been both the spotlight shown on the care sector and on care workers themselves. Promises for 3 months now about what was going to happen, not just on PPE, not just on sick pay, but perhaps more poignantly at the moment on testing. And the result, there is progress, credit where it's due, but there is still a mountain to climb. Again, the issue remains that where care workers catch the virus, many of them obviously do what they're supposed to do. Others, by leaving work, simply won't get paid. And there's a very practical and economic driver here. And that will mean that they either come into work and infect others, or they don't do what they should do and self-distance from their families, etc. So there is a huge, huge onus on the government to really, really deliver on the testing of care workers as a very high priority. What has happened in the care sector, a sector that was already teetering on the brink before the pandemic, is so tragic. But we do need to focus so closely over the coming weeks, particularly as the lockdown begins to be lifted. The care sector could make or break this pandemic, and we hope it makes it go away, but there are still big risks involved. And I have to put in a word for care workers. If you needed to see a more dedicated, more hard-working group of workers through this pandemic, look at the care workers. Look at those women who, throughout their whole day, are running risks and are still paid no more often than the minimum wage. It's a sector that needs to be looked at on so many fronts.
Liz Snape, Assistant General Secretary of Unison, thank you very much for your time.
Gloria, do you think the unions are going to be playing